Today's sermon is entitled Transitions, What We Learn from Change, to be delivered by Steve and Marsha Nathanson. The sermon covers two of the UU principles. Principle one, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and principle four, the search for truth and meaning. Marsha and Steve have recently celebrated the 10th year of owning a home in Cambria and the start of their bi-coastal lifestyle. Prior to them retiring from their career as educators, and that's 76 years collectively, a lifetime, they spent many years adapting to the ebb and flow, the pendulum swings of educational trends and theories, and the slings and arrows of budgetary constraints. During this time, they published articles in professional journals, conducted evening family literacy programs, and established an educational consulting business, adapting the discoveries of neuroscience to educational settings. Marsha and Steve love the Central Coast lifestyle, as we all do, and have truly found another home here. They have been members of the UU community of Cambria since 2013. When not traveling, hiking, collecting new succulent specimens, or wine tasting, they enjoy the camaraderie of their many musical and foodie friends. They especially love the beauty and nature of their proximity to the Fiscalini Ranch. Even the weather and the microclimates amaze them. As Steve put it, if you don't like the present Cambria weather, stick around, it'll change. Steve and Marsha.
Good morning, everyone. We'd like to begin our talk today with a story about a 20th century equivalent of the wagon trains heading west. We're talking about modern airline travel. Our semi-annual trek usually takes 6 hours of airtime, but with catching the connecting flight in Phoenix and a mad scramble through the cavernous airport, add an extra hour. We're always breathless when we arrive at the gate for our connection to San Luis Obispo. This past October, when we got to the gate with our carry-ons, we were greeted with the news that the connecting flight was 90 minutes late. At least it wasn't canceled. This required urgent calls to the friends who were picking us up. It wrecked their plans too, and the fact that we were inconveniencing them caused us even more stress. Because of the time change, when we finally collapsed in our home in Cambria, we had been awake for over 20 hours. As the rock song goes, you have to go through hell before you get to heaven. But finally, we had arrived. The day after our arrival, the stress is not over. Jet-lagged Steve began putting the dirty dishes in the oven because that's where the dishwasher is in New York. It's always amusing how we do things automatically without even thinking. After the momentary panic about finding our car keys passed, I was anxious to get into the car, but my car didn't recognize me and open as if I were a suspicious interloper. Furthermore, once inside the car, I wasted time trying to press an ignition button that was nowhere to be found on our older model Subaru. Restocking the bare pantry and the empty refrigerator was a further challenge. Shopping trips require a pre-shopping massive inventory to avoid duplication or omission. No, honey, we have olive oil in New York, not here. Sugar? Ugh, that's the other house. Or our sheer panic upon forgetting where our supply of toilet tissue was located. So you may ask, why do we endure these slings and arrows of transitions of 2 houses, 2 climates, 2 sets of everything? Simply put, these transitions have kept us sane, happy, and above all, confident that our problem-solving ability, especially as we grow older. Humans are evolutionarily predisposed to resist change. Fighting against change is a survival mechanism. Change threatens the existing order of things, and sudden unwelcome surprises that alter our routines and habits are often seen as risks to avoid. These unpredictable events may invoke a fight or flight response, our brain's natural instinct for survival. As Peter Senge, an MIT professor, has noted, people don't resist change per se, they resist being changed. Dr. Sanim Hafiz, a licensed clinical psychologist, posits that the human brain is protective to a fault. He notes, when we introduce any change of routine into our lives, our brain is also on guard and ready to pounce, immediately considering the possible threat that change can carry. Our brain uses energy from mental reserves because it doesn't know if the change is good for us or not. Red flags go up. The amygdala, that part of the brain that controls the fight or flight response, is a powerful force influencing our reactions and judgments and may generate states of denial, fear, or anxiety. In Psychology Today, Kim Schneiderman notes, change is the one constant in life, and yet we are often surprised when it comes. Our educational system doesn't support resilience to change because it reinforces the belief that skill mastery yields the predictable comforts of a settled life. Then, as we age, we are measured by our stability, not our vulnerability to change. We believe in change as long as the wheel of fortune spins in our favor. However, when it doesn't spin in our favor or bad things happen, we begin to question our preconceived expectations about life. If we don't welcome change or adapt, we may attempt to numb our anxiety with self-destructive behaviors and or substance abuse. We may become depressed, hostile, oppositional, frustrated, or anxious. In the extreme, these can be very maladaptive responses to change. In Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, Dr. Daniel Amen notes that people who are stressed out by changes often suffer from cognitive inflexibility. In other words, they get stuck. Getting stuck, according to Amen, can lead to such problems as addiction, chronic pain, obsessive compulsive disorders, eating disorders, oppositional behavior, argumentativeness, and road rage. You can and you should teach your brain to get used to change. It's beneficial to teach our brains new ways to cope with inevitable changes. If we practice these adaptable behaviors, this helps our brain's flexibility even when unexpected changes occur. So how can we become more adaptable to change, less anxious and less resistant? Must we always fight change? Is chaos necessarily a bad thing? As George Bernard Shaw said, those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. Or as Ben Franklin, the famous visionary statesman and inventor, put it, when you're finished changing, you're finished. What would life be like without progress, without inventions, without change? And now it's time for a change. Steve?
Thank you, Marsha, and thank you, everyone, this morning. In response to traumatic and unpleasant changes, people have sought comforts in teachings of ancient philosophies, religion, or psychotherapy. We may seek out self-help and spiritual growth books, articles, podcasts, and meditations to guide and comfort us through life's changes. In our research, we reconnected with some authors and texts which you might remember that provide powerful insights into change theory. Let's take a look at some of these. One touchstone book from the 70s was Gail Shee's Passages, Predictable Crises of Adult Life. Shee's book began with adolescent changes and continues through the entire life cycle. As she points out, crises are prerequisites for adult identity and development. Here are some of her predictable crises. Number one, pulling up roots from breast and to breakaway in the teenage years. Two, the trying 20s when you're getting off to a running start. 3, the passage to the 30s, coupling and family life. 4, the age 40 crucible, facing midlife and middle age. And 5, the change of life, menopause and hormonal changes. Her final section is entitled Renewal, Hope, and Aging. In this phase, she notes that previous stages give us resources with which to make decisions and deal with the changes as we age. She says, having experimented with many techniques for facing problems and change, seniors have modified many of the assumptions and illusions of youth. They are practiced. They know what works. They can make decisions with a welcome economy of action. A great deal of behavioral red tape can be cut through once people have developed judgment enriched by both their inner and outer experience. So far from being incapable of change, old dogs can learn new tricks. Although she focused on midlife crises, today's seniors are often physically active and tend to live longer than their parents. Such trends supports her observations that's about seniors and renewal and hope that some find in their final decades. But while she talks about life passages as a linear progression from adolescence to old age, psychiatrist Viktor Frankl championed the idea of embracing change after the trauma of his years spent in Auschwitz, one of the Nazi death camps. He discovered that his mother, brother, wife, and unborn child were all dead. Everything in his life had changed. All that he loved was lost. But as time progressed, Frankl began to discover that even though he could never go back to the life he once had, he was still free to meet new friends, find new love, become a father again, work with patients again, enjoy music, and read books. Frankl called his hope in the face of such despair tragic optimism. His landmark book, Man's Search for Meaning, was inspired by his experiences. Frankl argued that we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to cope with it and move forward in life with a renewed purpose. As he noted, and I quote, "We must never forget that we may also find meaning in life even when confronted with a hopeless situation, when facing a fate that cannot be changed. For what then matters is to bear witness to the uniquely human potential as it is, which is to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to turn one's predicament into a human achievement. When we are no longer able to change a situation, just think of an incurable disease such as inoperable cancer, then we are challenged to change ourselves." In his work with clients, Frankl developed what he called logotherapy, which literally means meaning therapy. In logotherapy, patients are guided to find meaning and purpose despite the powerful undertow of negativity generated by negative change. Patients are helped to discover the meaning of life in 3 different ways. 1, by creating a work or doing a deed. 2, by experiencing something or encountering someone. Or 3, by the attitude we take towards unavoidable suffering. In Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl relates a story of a patient who had experienced profound depression from the loss of his wife. Dr. Frankl then asked him, "What would have happened if you had died first and your wife would have had to survive you?" The patient responded that he would not have been there to protect and comfort his wife during her illness. Then Dr. Frankl continued, "You see, such a suffering had been spared her by you, and it was you who spared her this terrible fate." Frankl noted, "I could not revive his wife, but in that moment, I did succeed in changing his attitude towards suffering." On a lighter but telling note, Dr. Spencer Johnson's best-selling fable about dealing with change, Who Moved My Cheese, tells the story of pair of mice, Sniff and Scurry, and a pair of little human workers, Hem and Haw. They have all had to adjust to constant change when their beloved cheese supplies are disrupted. The cheese in the mazes moved, and the mice who explored new avenues for finding cheese prosper. Although Hem and Haw, the little humans, whined, "Who moved my cheese?" and spend their time being sad about the problem and resistant to new solutions. Johnson's humorous parable echoes Frankl's truism that, quote, change is inevitable, but suffering is optional, and even counterproductive. Johnson's "who moved my cheese" has been applied to personal growth as well as organizational change theory. So now we're going to have another organizational change, and I'll get Marsha back up here.
Okay, so now let's discuss the elephant in the room, the life changes we are all experiencing since COVID entered our consciousness and our bodies. Actually. 1 minute we were doing what we always do, going about our daily business, and we were keeping sort of one eye on the virus in a foreign land. And then the next day, boom, we were in a head-on collision with a 100-year pandemic event. Authorities began to jump into action. Don't go to church, don't go to mosque, don't see your friends, don't go to restaurants, don't go outside, don't go inside, don't use public transport, and don't visit your parents, don't go to school, don't go to work, wear a mask, wash hands frequently, use hand sanitizer. It was a barrage of do's and don'ts from every direction possible. And it was a lot, and it was scary. The phrase, the new normal, was spoken with a mixture of fear and regret. Thanks to the virus, though, we shunned human contact and shifted more and more of what we did to from in-person to online. We started to rely on the power of the internet in order to order our groceries, to order our meals, to speak to our friends, or even to learn how to bake bread. We relied on the internet to attend Zoom UU services. We used it to exercise, to meditate, to speak to our therapists and our doctors. Businesses and organizations shifted to remote working and learning. With Zoom, business casual became dress shirts over pajama bottoms. Many of us missed the freedoms taken away by the virus, and most of us learned ways to adapt to an uncontrollable situation, even as the untimely and tragic deaths of so many curdled our optimism. While Zoomland and Grubhub became familiar and convenient, many adaptations exposed numerous social inequities. Not every house had internet access or multiple computers to deal with stay-at-home work or school. The most fortunate white-collar workers were able to work from home, yet many workers could not do so. Service workers became heroes, performing risky, scary, and often deadly business. Then the vaccine rollout did not occur equally in all states and all countries, exposing still more socioeconomic inequities. Racial tensions and a cry for social justice became heightened. How many of us developed COVID fatigue from the constant tide of new and unwelcome change? The CDC had noted that during the advent of the pandemic, mental health issues proliferated. This is seen in the breakdown and stress in families. It also was a catalyst for the burnout and resignations of frontline workers and the great resignation of salaried workers, which is evidenced in staffing shortages and supply chain issues. And we have no staffing shortage here. So Steve, please come up.
So although COVID spurred extreme changes in many aspects of human life, however, pain and distress are not just virus related, but I think we see a part of the entire human experience. So let's give ourselves a moment to think about a time of extreme distress in your life. Let's take a pause. Was it death in the family? Loss of job? A climate-driven natural disaster? Being a victim of a serious crime? Experiencing a serious medical diagnosis? How did you immediately react? Was it denial? Was it anger? Fear? Social withdrawal? Could you have reacted differently? Dr. Marsha Linehan developed an approach to helping people who exhibit extreme negative behaviors as a result of change. This is known as dialectic behavioral therapy, or DBT. During DBT, clients are taught to practice distress tolerance skills, which enable them to stop turning into painful situations and convert that from longer-term suffering. Distress tolerance, in Linehan's view, is 1, the ability to perceive one's environment without putting demands on it to be different. Or 2, the ability to experience one's current emotional state without attempting to change it. And 3, the ability to observe one's own thoughts and reactions without attempting to stop and control them. Linehan incorporates mindfulness and meditation as part of her therapy. The concept of radical acceptance has its origins in DBT. The goals of radical acceptance skills are to reduce your suffering and increase your sense of freedom. In other words, learning how not to get stuck. Radical acceptance means opening yourself up to fully experience life as it is in the moment without despair, resentment, bitterness, shame, or feelings of passivity and helplessness. Radical acceptance does not signal approval of your situation. It signals acceptance and emotional detachment from it. It helps you focus on what you can control, and it frees mental resources to allow you to practice self-care. Here are some statements which are suggested by Linehan in the DBT protocols. When I fight against my worries and negative emotions, I only fuel them to grow larger. It is unhelpful for me to fight against what has happened in the past. I will get through this, and this feeling will fade even though it feels painful now. It's possible for me to feel anxiety, but still manage the situation in an effective way. When I try to fight against present reality, then I don't see the options in my situation. It is possible for me to accept what happened and still end up happy. Radical acceptance, as seen in the writings and meditation podcasts by Tara Brach and others, presents a framework to deal with significant change and sudden unwanted changes. It also offers a way to move forward to counter our stress and our critical self-judgments, such as the could-have, should-have stances. It helps us to reframe negative situations and ultimately accept what we cannot change. Marsha?
Come on up here, Steve. Okay. Since we have all experienced stress at times in our lives, it's beneficial to develop a toolbox of skills that helps us cope with change. Stephanie Sarkis in Psychology Today discussed 10 ways to cope with big changes. I don't read it. We'd like to discuss these.
Is there a divorce on the front here?
Yeah, no. Acknowledge that things are changing. Denial is a powerful tool and it protects us in many ways. However, sometimes we get so caught up in fighting change that we put off actually dealing with it. Realize that even good changes can cause stress. Even positive life changes, such as graduation, becoming a parent, or receiving a job promotion, can generate stress. What do I do now? You might ask yourself. Don't get down on yourself for feeling stress in these situations. It's normal.
So keep up your regular schedule as much as possible and limit changes. Having a routine acts as an anchor, a reminder that some things are still the same. This gives the overworked brain one less thing to worry about. Try to eat as healthy as possible and exercise. Exercising 3 times a week has been found to decrease symptoms of depression. You'll find that many times your motivation will kick in when you're active, not to mention the sudden emergence of breakthrough ideas and insights. Comfort foods with many carbs boost your serotonin levels, the brain chemical that becomes depleted when you undergo stress, but only indulge these in moderation. Marsha?
Seek support. Nobody gets through life alone. It's okay to ask for help. You may find that someone's experience can comfort and assist you in coming to terms with your situation. Even just verbalizing your problems to another trusted listener or group may be a positive first step. Also, write down the positives that have come from this change. Maybe due to this change in your life, you have met new people or found new exercise partners. Or maybe the change helped you to prioritize what is most important in your life. Change presents us with an opportunity to grow. It's important to acknowledge how things have improved as a result of change.
So get proactive. Being proactive means taking charge and working preventatively. For example, making that doctor's appointment instead of putting it off and letting stress and worry build up. Vent, but only to a point. Try gearing the conversation towards actions. When people brainstorm together, their creativity and hopefulness can be a catalyst for constructive problem solving.
Back away from social media. Many people post highlights and photos of only the positive things in their lives and leave out the stressful moments. Step away from social media if you find yourself comparing your life to others. If you must stay current with Facebook or social media, try to limit what you post. And when you post, try to do it in a calm state. Also remember that what you post never really disappears. Give yourself a break. There are no mistakes, only good stories to tell later, and make a point to laugh. Nothing says that you have to function at 100% all the time. It's one of the great things about being human. It's learning from mistakes that really count. Also, laughing increases positive brain chemicals such as dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins, which make you feel good. It also reduces cortisol, a stress-inducing hormone. Try to find the humor in your predicaments, as we always try to do. Comedians, real comedians, do this all the time as a resource for their material.
Yeah, I put some money in the change machine, but it didn't work. Finally, we'd like to also add, do something new to our adaptation response toolkit. Novelty creates new neural connections, skills, and gives us ways to keep our brains stimulated and engaged. In his book, Beginners, Tom Vanderbilt describes the joy and the transformative power of lifelong learning. He says, and I quote, "Regularly stepping out of our comfort zones just feels like life practice. The fast pace of technological change turns us all, in a sense, into perpetual novices, always on the upward slope of learning. Our knowledge constantly requires upgrades, just like our phones. Even if we keep the same job for years, the required skills to perform it change. The more willing we are to be brave beginners, the better. As Ravi Kumar, the president of the IT giant Infosys, describes it, you have to learn to unlearn, and learn to relearn." In closing, we've come full circle as to why we laugh at our foibles and why we leap into new situations, such as commuting 3,000 miles twice a year. By changing our routines, our houses, the way things are, we are trying to keep our aging brains active and care for our mental health. We've learned and relearned much by living in New York and Cambria. We've developed coping skills and appreciate changes as for us as a friend rather than a foe. We find the humor in our mistakes.
Mistakes. Take 2, take 3, take 4.
As we confront all the unknowns in today's world, transitioning helps us become confident, survive, and even thrive. Thank you.
Thank you.